I just woke up a couple hours ago. I don't know what my hair is doing. I don't brush it. I don't do anything about the way that it looks. I just sort of live with the way that it looks when I wake up. And maybe that's a bad thing, but I don't particularly care. It confuses me, all the time people tell me what good or bad things are to do. There's these rules that run the world, run human relationships, and run things in general. All of these strange rules that exist all over the place. And I have a lot of trouble wrapping my head around them. Like, obviously, I don't understand people, or else I would be able to get along with people in a easier way. Um, I mean, a lot of people's motivations, if I try to break them down logically, they can make sense. But I have to, in order to understand them, use something else as a reference point. Like, I often get sort of made fun of, or at least have jabs thrown at me for saying stuff like, the way that I understand people is through anime and things like that, which is sort of a meme. It's kind of a joke for me to say that. But it's also true. Like the way that I understand people is largely through media and then using that as a reference point. Like if I didn't have art, I would not understand anyone because like the main mode of communication I understand is art. And so, good to see you, Star. Hello, hello, C. Um, yeah, I just woke up a couple hours ago. Um, you know, but yeah, like the main way that I understand people is through art. I don't understand people like at my baseline, and so oftentimes when I get into conversations with people, I get into these thought loops like, especially if it's like a radical disagreement or something like that, of like, why can't you just think different? Why do you think like this? I don't understand why you think like this. And it's difficult. It's really really difficult for me to understand other people, especially like when I was younger. I'd get into these huge arguments with people where I'd get really angry, and I either severed a lot of relationships that way or made a lot of people really angry at me, and I just don't get it. I don't understand the rules that govern the world, like etiquette, politeness. Politeness has never made any sense to me. I've never understood politeness at all. Like I try to be as polite as I can because I care about the feelings of other people. Um, but I don't understand why ethics are what they are. Like I don't understand why politeness is a thing. I don't get it. I don't understand how any of it works. And I guess just part of why I stay in my room so much is because I don't understand why people do the things that they do. Normies, every time I'm in a situation with normies, like I'm always the odd one out. I'm always the either the super quiet one who no one understands, or it's like, why is this person here? Or I'm just making like really socially autistic mistakes all the time. Um, I don't know what to do about it. Uh, how do I fix this problem? How do I how do I fix this? I don't really know how this all works. Like if I were to say something along the lines of like if I were to make like a really sexual joke in public, like that would make total sense to me why someone would find that offensive because I've just heard people get offended about that so many times. But why though? Why are people offended by that? I don't know. It's all very difficult to me. I don't get it. By the way, I started smoking again. Um, this pack of cigarettes was like $3. So I was just at the Dollar General and I thought, why not? I'm 18 years old. It doesn't, I can do it. Why not? So I started smoking again on occasion. It's just relaxing for me. It's just relaxing to be able to have a cigarette in my mouth. I don't know why. But even when I'm not getting like the really nice effects of it, like there's something just internally comforting about being able to smoke. I'm a really bad influence. I'm a really bad influence, man. At what point does this, like, make people uncomfortable? That's what I want to know. Like, where can I go to step over people's line? Because I've stepped over people's line before. You know, I've made people very uncomfortable and upset with my videos before. But how can I do it again? You know, like, what's the edge that I have to take in order to upset people? That's what I've been thinking a lot about lately. Because the Yoshika Miyako Reds are mostly gone now, I think. Like, I think all the long videos scared them away, because I haven't seen them comment in like a long time. Now that the Yoshika Miyako Reds are off my lawn, how do I get everyone else off my lawn? How do I scare them away? That's what I want to know. Is it working? Yeah, it said it was upside down before. This to me is about the worst time of year. Spring, summer, I can't stand it. I cannot stand the weather at this time. It's always the worst. Like, I try to go out and get sunlight and do what other people tell me to do, but just about every time I regret it, because I end up feeling like shit afterwards. The heat always makes me feel like shit. The sunlight on my face and my eyes always gives me a headache. I always feel bad afterwards. And the summer and the spring just happen to be the most sunny times of the year. I fucking hate it. You know, I had a really good summer in 2019, not because I went outside, but because of the opposite, because I stayed inside. If I went outside every single day, I might call it, you know, one of the worst periods I've had in a while. Because I can't stand the heat. I have no tolerance for the heat. I can't stand it. And I like coming out here to the park during the wintertime because no one's here, you know? No one's here during the wintertime. Nobody else wants to come out. But now it's like everybody's here. Well, not in the park, but around the park. Everybody's driving. All this noise pollution. Constant noise all the time. All the time. No? And this is what I have to deal with. Nothing but cars, nothing but noise. It's like people revving up bikes all the time. Just nothing but noise, you know? This is what I have to deal with. I hate this time of year. Absolutely hate this time of year. I want to live in somewhere colder. I was talking on my live stream today about the idea of living in South Dakota. South Dakota is so cheap. You can pretty easily live there, no problem. It's just, you know, nobody wants to live there because there's nothing to do there. It's normal people, they like going to concerts, they like going to movies, they like making friends. I don't like doing any of those things. I just want to be left alone. If I could go to a place where I'm just left alone, I think I'd be pretty happy. You know? I just want to be left alone. I think so. Yeah, this is my park right here. Now, I come here pretty often. The problem is that, you know, just every fucking time I come here, there's nothing but people. It's always loud. Can't walk here at night because of the nature of the place that I live. So I end up getting stuck with all this fucking noise pollution every single day. Every single fucking day. You know, people often ask me why I'm interested in communicating in other languages so much, why that's such an important goal to me, and why I seem to be starting back up on Japanese now that I have all of this time in isolation that I can spend alone and actually practice again without being distracted by Discord. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that I do not know very much about other people. And the way that we learn about other people is by talking to them, by experiencing things, by going places and doing things, having experiences. You know, like I can make a lot of statements from stuff that I've read, and I do try to read a lot, and in a sense that's a form of experience, but that's only imparting other people's experiences onto yourself. You have to have a filter to view that through, and if the filter that you're viewing it through is only other media that you've consumed, then you're always going to be viewing things from a somewhat narrow lens. There's certain perspectives that you simply don't have access to because you haven't been able to experience them and find them. I watch a lot of people who travel into other countries, for instance, just so they can understand what life is like in those countries. And for me, just getting a glimpse from those videos of at how different life is for people in those countries and for what it can say about how the human brain works or how different cultures function, or just life in general, like I want to be able to directly experience that, to have direct contact with those different perspectives, with those different ways of doing things, so I can really grasp them, so I can really understand them. Because I can get a basic idea of it from viewing it through, again, the interpretive lens of someone else, from their experiences being imparted onto me, but it's not my experience, you know? It's not me going there and doing the thing. It's not me directly communicating with those people to get the ideas directly. And for pretty much this entire month, and I mean mostly most of this year, like ever since the year started, I've just been constantly thinking about how little I know. Because there's really, like, I'm limited to my room and to the things that I can read, and I read a lot of stuff, but the more that I read, the more that I realize how much stuff I don't know. There are so many things to learn in the world that it kind of blows your mind how little information you have. It blows your mind how little experience you have. And if I want to be able to truly empathize with other people, if I want to truly be able to understand other people, you have to have experience. You have to be able to be put into a situation where, you know, where you're directly in contact with those things. And I think I often come off as arrogant or like I'm, you know, like I believe that I'm just this guru of every single thing in existence, when really I'm not. I don't think that way. It only appears that way because I've communicated with stupid people like Yoshika Miyako Red, who objectively have less experience than I do, but claim that they have more experience, you know? That just because he's older, he assumes that he has more experience, when I've been through way more shit than that guy will ever be through, you know? In the span of 1 year alone, I had more experiences than that guy will have in his entire life. That's just a fact. And so I can appear arrogant because I say things like that. But that guy is an especially retarded guy. Like, when I'm responding to him, the reason I'm responding to him is, you know, because this person is involved in or was involved in my community and is making statements that are just untrue about me and trying to discredit my arguments by saying he's somehow had more experience just because he's slightly older, despite the fact that I've been through way, way, way more than he's ever been through in his entire life. And so I may come off as arrogant because I'm telling an older person than that. But, you know, age is not the end-all be-all. And just because I may have more experience than an especially stupid and an especially unexperienced person, that doesn't mean that I have a lot of experience in general, you know? And I'm constantly recognizing how little experience I have and how little I know, because I don't know that much. And I think through learning language and through traveling, I know Dogod on a stream that I did recently asked me if I gave up on leaving the country. I haven't given up on leaving the country. I've just decided that I need to have a base of operations in the United States if I'm going to be leaving the country. But the goal is very much still in place, to learn Japanese first and then move on to other ones and then learn those and be able to travel to those places and communicate with the people there and take in the information that's there. But if I'm going to learn, and if I'm going to have a more all-encompassing perspective on different things, I need that experience. I need to grow. I mean, that's part of why I talk about evolving so much on my channel, is that if I keep doing things the same way, I'm not going to be able to evolve. Is that I have to make myself uncomfortable and force myself to do things that will probably, bother me a little bit, at least, if I'm going to evolve. And that's really important. You have to be challenging your preconceptions and the way that you think, because if you don't, you end up just resting on your laurels and assuming you know everything when really you don't know that much. And I've been there before. I've gotten especially arrogant about stuff that I really didn't understand or didn't know. That's part of why I don't call myself a communist, for example, anymore. I used to call myself a communist, but the more information I've interfaced with, the more that I've learned that the reality is much, much more complicated than any particular ideology we may label ourselves to or ascribe ourselves to. It is much, much more complicated. Um, and so we can't we can't very easily just say this system is the system that must be done and that is correct, when there's so many factors at play that, deciding on that one, you're losing perspective of all the other things that exist. And I don't necessarily know what all of those things are. There are things that, I've seen or that I've learned about that I had no idea existed. Like, our perspective is ultimately made up of what we've been exposed to. And when we start to realize how much stuff there is still to be exposed to, then we realize how little we've been exposed to, then we realize how limited our perspective is. So, like, that's part of why. That's part of one of the big, big reasons why I want to learn other languages, is so I can more easily have direct contact with other perspectives and be able to more directly understand them. Um, because the world is a complicated, complicated place, and if I'm going to navigate this shithole, then I ought to be doing so with the most preparedness. I have a real problem when it comes to memories. Not a problem with remembering things. I mean, I have that. What the fuck is going on with my hair? I woke up like that. Um, but I randomly will remember back to bad things that have happened, or embarrassing moments I've had, moments where I've been cringeworthy. And of course, because it had been drilled into my head when I was a little kid that I was a boring child by the only human beings who I interacted with, my family, I developed an understanding that everything I said needed to be placed under a great amount of scrutiny, so I wouldn't say things incorrectly. So the things that I said would be interesting so I wouldn't get that reaction. And it kind of had an adverse effect, because I started stuttering a lot more. I started being a lot less confident in the things that I said, and it all sounded worse because I was thinking about what I was saying more than actually saying it. I became really unnatural because I felt as though I had to practice everything I was saying in order to say it properly. I also started coming off as inauthentic to people because of that. Like, I was making things up in order to get the words out, because I had spent time thinking about it, when really I was just thinking about how to be interesting, because I was terrified of that reaction. I had gotten hit multiple times as a kid, as young as 4 years old, just for being boring, for being seen as boring. If you have a child, it's kind of important that you're patient with the dumb things a kid says. It's part of having a kid. My parents didn't get that at the time, or they did and just took out their anger on me. And I had a lot other rejection from family members and from people in school when I finally did go to school, which I did not go to school and have not gone to school for the majority of my life. That rejection just reinforced a lot of the times when I would get hit for being boring or yelled at for being boring, or when I would be in the middle of a sentence and get yelled at for not getting out the sentence fast enough or with using the right words. And that's never really left me. And I have ways that people talk that like bother me every single time, that it's I think it's actually a trigger, where when someone tells me to stop, or when they say just stop, in like a few words, I get really, really upset, no matter the context. Well, not no matter the context. If it's as a joke, obviously if it's as a joke, that's different. But when someone very earnestly and sincerely just tells me when I'm in the middle of talking to stop, I get really, really upset, and I remain angry at that person, or angry at myself, or both, for a long time. Like, there are times when friends have told me that almost a year ago, and I will randomly remember back to it and then get upset, because it reminds me of my family just constantly telling me to stop when I was in the middle of an idea, yelling it at me, you know? That doesn't really leave me. I always remember it. It's really hard to explain this to people, that when I remember a time where I was cringeworthy, or where I embarrassed myself, I know that no one else probably remembers it, or if they do, they don't care. But the memories for me are like an interruption. They're an intrusion on my life. I can't control them. I see a small thing that reminds me of it, and then I get really upset, sometimes for days or weeks on end, just from remembering a time where I embarrassed myself, or where I was cringeworthy, or where I was annoying to someone. And I don't really know how to fix that. The only way I've been able to make the problem easier is just by escaping from the problem, making myself not care about it momentarily. And overall, I would say that's made me feel better, but it's never enough. It doesn't make the problem go away, it just makes you ignore the problem for long enough to keep you alive. But the amount of pain that I feel when I remember a time where I could not present myself with the most efficacy isn't really like the level of pain that people feel when they're just embarrassed. For me, it's not an embarrassment, it's a chronic amount of shame. I used to get into the habit of, I don't know if you could call it self-harming, because I don't like to say that I've self-harmed before, even though I've obviously cut myself. People who've known me for a long time know that in pretty visceral detail. I don't know if I should call it self-harming. I have an aversion to saying that. I don't know why. But I used to feel like I should be punished, that I needed to be in pain, not because I enjoyed it, I hated it, that was the point. And I don't understand these people who enjoy self-harm. I don't tend to say that there's something wrong with people, because I think ultimately, everything you do is subjective, and it's one of those whatever floats your boat, mate kind of things, but I really don't get it. There's like a fundamental difference between me and people who like to self-harm. It's just so bizarre. It's like, for me, the point was always, I need to be punished for embarrassing myself, or I need to be punished for not using my words correctly. I need to be punished for not being the kind of person that other people would want me to be. And so I used to pretty hard just punch myself in the face over and over and over again in order to make myself feel the physical pain of the emotional pain, you know? I wanted the emotional pain to have a representation, something that was coherent, something that you can immediately understand. But I also wanted myself to know that I needed to be punished for not doing things correctly, to instill it into my brain to do it correctly next time. And I don't really feel like that very often anymore. Sometimes I do, but most of the time it's just me being sad. There's so many cringeworthy things I've done and said because I'm socially inept. I was homeschooled for most of my life. I don't know how you people don't get this, that I'm socially inept, you know? I'm fucking autistic, at least functionally, if not actually autistic, you know? But people don't consider that context when they talk to you. People aren't considering what you've been through or who you are. They're just considering what they want to say at the time. Well, there was one friend I had who was going through suicidality at the time. They were talking about wanting to kill themselves. I should have never gotten as upset about it as I was. I should have known they were making it up, that they were never actually going to do it. But of course, their writing style had a degree of seriousness to it that I got caught up into. And I was trying to tell them that they were meaningful to me, and I was remembering back to conversations I had with them, and I had brought up the first time we had talked, said, yeah, I remember that. And then I had started wording and then rewording the same comment over and over and over again about sort of me caring about them. I wrote about one or two things, short things, in reference to that. And then I basically said, yeah, I've just been rewriting the same thing again and again. Yeah, I should stop. And that fucking asshole, I'll never forgive them for this. I'm always going to be angry about this. They said, just stop. Yeah, just stop. And I was so upset when they told me that, because I was simultaneously wanting to tell them that they were meaningful to me and wanting to give this genuine, this like genuine speech to them that I was trying to formulate. And then at the same time, I had a moral opposition to what I was doing. So I was caught up in the anxiety of I might lose this friend that I have, and at the same time dealing with that performance anxiety of how to say it, and at the same time dealing with a moral opposition to telling people not to kill themselves, because I didn't want to present the idea that because I would be upset they shouldn't do it, because that's wrong, you know? If someone wants to kill themselves, that's their personal choice. That's what they want to do. And it doesn't matter how upset about it I am, because ultimately, if they feel that that's better for them, then they should be full well allowed to do it. And that moral opposition, that guilt of towards me saying that I would be upset, that guilt towards them, it felt like I was breaking my own rules by trying to write out this thing. And I was dealing with that conflict. The conflict had so much emotion to it that I couldn't word things in a way that would be effective, in a way that would garner the kind of reaction that I wanted. Because I was dealing with so much in my own head. Do people not comprehend this, that you're dealing with too much in your own head, you know? Just stop, of course. I said I fucking would. You don't need to tell me to do it. It really is a huge trigger for me. And I've never been able to get over that, where I think about it randomly and then for the entire day I'm upset. I thought about it this morning just because I heard the words in a song. And then it made me think of that, and I've been upset for the entire day. I was gonna say, why am I like this? But why I'm like this is clearly very obvious, you know? And I don't know any way to fix it. I'm constantly being controlled by memories of things that have previously happened. Because I just play it in my head over and over and over again until I make myself more and more upset. But I'm not intentionally doing it. I'm not trying to think about it. It just comes up. And I'm not going to be one of these people who gives, like, trigger warnings and says, these are my triggers all the time. That's gay. I don't want to do that. I don't want people to know that I'm bothered by these very specific things that either bring me into a psychotic rage towards myself, or immense sadness, or both, you know? I don't want to be telling people that. This just all makes my blood pressure get really bad. Like, when I get stressed, I get extreme blood pressure problems. Or when I was living in Virginia, I had a doctor that told me that my blood pressure was at the level of a guy in their 70s. That's how stressed out I get. This is a terrible world we live in, man. Thank God I have these videos so I can actually talk about these things and feel somewhat better afterwards. A lot of the videos that I tend to recommend on this channel to new viewers tend to be ones that explain my worldview, because I make reference to those videos in other videos, and as a result of that, I would like people watching those other videos to be up to date with other stuff that I've said that would allow you to understand it in more depth or just at all. But some of my other favorite videos, or videos that I would like to recommend to people but have trouble recommending, are videos like Discord is Degenerate, or videos like Star Goes Outside, that are just incredibly silly, but people oftentimes have not been able to understand that they're meant to be silly. Videos that the presentation of them, more than what's being said, is the joke. Discord is Degenerate, for example. It is my real opinion that Discord has structural problems as a platform, and it is my real opinion that I would rather just be looking at green text over a completely black background with no profile pictures as I'm talking to everyone on the internet, because I just really like using IRC. But
I know that those opinions are absurd to have. I know that they're incredibly silly. I'm self-aware of how they're going to be perceived when I present them. And so the whole video is dressed in these mimetic images that are meant to confuse people or piss them off or make them laugh. Images that are incredibly silly that oftentimes correspond to what I'm saying. I'm speaking in a much more heightened tone. I use a remix of that song from Undertale, Megalovania, in one of the parts where like my voice is really like getting louder and speeding up. The whole tone of the video is silly, but I still had people who watched that video and didn't think it was a joke. It's not that my opinions weren't real necessarily, but I was heightening them just like I was heightening the tone, the editing, and the music of the video in order to present a reality that's more extreme than the one that I reside in. It's not that my opinions themselves aren't extreme, they are, but in order to present them to be understood, I also wanted to present them in a way where everyone could be in on the joke, where I could be in on the joke of how silly having these opinions is, the fact that like none of the stuff I was talking about really matters, and that you could be in on the joke because you're watching the video. But there were a lot of people who came away from that video as if I was being entirely serious, and I don't know if that's just because so many of the people who watch my videos tend to reside in like incel communities for people who aren't employed and this kind of thing, and those people in those communities tend to not be able to make jokes about themselves. They tend to not be able to look at themselves in a critical light. They're kind of just obsessed with their own philosophy that doesn't ultimately matter at all. Tends to have a lot of conclusions that you have to ignore a lot of things that are very clearly in reality in order to believe a lot of the incel ideology. And a lot of those people tend to watch my videos. So maybe they looked at that video and just assumed I was being serious because they're already that retarded or they're already that silly. With the video Star Goes Outside, for example, at the time I did have trouble going outside. That was part of the joke of the video, but I'm also like running around and like yelling at cars and sort of like incoherently rambling into the camera as I'm like swinging the camera around everywhere in the rain. It like when I made that video, I thought it was a hilarious video, but I got messages from people who said they thought it was serious, and the video was never serious. It was always meant to be a meme. So I don't know if I've just always thought that other people are going to be as in on the joke as I am, because I'm completely self-aware about how the things that I say are going to be perceived by other people in a broad sense. Like, I know a lot of the ideas that I have, a lot of my core philosophy is incredibly silly, and I think it should be made fun of. I think I should be made fun of because I think that's funny. It's very weird to me that people would come on my videos and then assume that I'm entirely self-serious about absolutely everything I'm saying, like Elliot Rodger or something. I change my views on a regular basis. I could be thinking one thing that I consider fundamental last week, and now it's completely different this week because I read a new book that retooled my perspective in some way. Maybe I compared that to some other information I have, and maybe those two things clashed together to create an entirely new synthesis that existed in neither of those. I'm thinking all the time. I'm never going to be sticking towards one point of view for very long. There are certain things that I have believed for a long time, but those things are few and far between. Believing in subjectivity, for example. That I'm probably never going to get rid of, but I don't know, maybe I will. It's very unlikely because I never have, but those very broad things are few and far between in comparison to all of the specifics that I'm constantly trying to challenge in my own head and am constantly recognizing the contradictions in to move to another point of view that has less contradictions, that's more suitable, until a new antithesis comes to that thesis and creates a new synthesis. So it, like, I find it very strange that people can come away from certain videos of mine where the presentation is obviously absurd, that at least for me it's obviously absurd, and for people who were in on the joke, who I didn't have to explain it to, or in videos where I'm intentionally presenting myself in an extreme way because I think it's silly. I don't particularly have any convictions. I think I'm way too young in the first place to have any convictions. All of the people who I look up to who are much older than me tend to say that having convictions is a form of weakness because you're not able to challenge your point of view to to the extent of improving it at that point. So yeah, none of this matters, and it's very silly. All of this is very silly. So, for the last couple days, I have been struggling to maintain my previous somewhat consistent sleep schedule of going to sleep around 8 to 11 p.m. in that general time frame. I was doing decent about it for about a week, I want to say, which is generally how long these things tend to last for me, through eating a good diet, getting good exercise each day, and generally staying away from blue light an hour or 2 hours prior to laying in bed to go to sleep. But these last couple nights have been particularly difficult, and last night in particular, I ended up massively changing my sleep schedule to going to sleep at like 7 or 8 in the morning because I couldn't get to sleep until I was at the absolute point of exhaustion. I laid down at nighttime and was laying in bed for like 4 hours, plagued by past memories and traumas and bad thoughts, which is generally what happens to me, generally why I can't seem to maintain a sleep schedule. But I spent so long being fairly adaptive in my sleep schedule, going all over the place because I lacked the necessity to do anything else, that I kind of forgot why I have such a preference for being either nocturnal or just fluctuating in my sleep schedule. And for as long as I can remember, it's been these persistent recollections of intense memories, remembering things that hurt a lot, and when I remember them, it kind of feels like they're happening again. I cried a lot last night because of these things I was remembering, and I couldn't sleep because of that. I end up calling a friend of mine to talk for a while, and that helps, and eventually I tire so much that when I lay back in bed, I don't have too much time to think, and then I sleep. But that was only after like 8 hours post normal bedtime. People can keep telling me how based it is to go with the sun, but the only way I can go with the sun is by force, seemingly, until this issue in my head is resolved. I almost said withdrawn. Withdrawn? That would have worked too. So, in the last vlog on this channel, I had talked about my persistent struggle with sleep as it pertains to the current traumas that have been bothering me, that I seem to be reliving throughout my day, and especially when I've been laying down trying to go to sleep. I've been reading a Scanner Darkly. It's quite late for me, by the way, that's why I'm this tired. I've been reading A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, which is an incredible book. Like, don't let the movie, I think it was Keanu Reeves in the movie, don't let that movie make you shy away from this book, because the story is told much better in that form. I'm about 106 pages through so far, but as I was reading the book, I kept having to have these moments where I read back the same part multiple times over, or was generally taken from what I was doing, and I feel like I had as many parts like that as I did times when I was just so enthralled by the writing that I wanted to read it over multiple times to really soak in the information out of appreciation for it, or vivid imagery I was experiencing in my head, alternating between that and just, quickly being so excited by the work that I, was going through it. But for as many alternating phases like that, I also had ones in which my mind felt kind of blank. I often get this when I'm doing really any kind of task, because I continue being met with these traumatic memories. These distractions seem to help me not think about them, but they never, I can never completely evade them. Oftentimes when I'm doing the thing or consuming the piece of media, they come back, especially when there's like a small thing that reminds me of that memory in the book, or movie or game or task, whatever it is. It's almost like my mind is constantly looking for those little things that could trigger me, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's like I'm there again, and I might, let out a word or a sound in response, like a pain response. And, here I am trying to recover cognitively from the blow that I was just dealt by, the thoughts that I was just having. Intrusive thoughts, memories, flashbacks. And as of late, it's been about an ex I had, who I had seen overseas, and some fucked up shit he did to me while I was there. It keeps running through my head. And the thing that I think kept me reading the book, besides the fact that I really liked the book, because I have trouble doing things that I like, is this persistent sense of what exactly would I do if I came back in here? I could watch videos on the telly, I guess. I could do research on my computer, but I didn't really feel like doing that. I could play a game, but I knew I wouldn't really have the motivation to do that or get much enjoyment from it. What, just lay in the bed all day? So I come out to the front room, where I often do my reading, especially once everyone is asleep. And, I'm just doing that. Well, I started out in here as a live stream, but I end up doing that for several hours. Of course, going slower than most people would have. But I end up doing that for several hours. And once I get, a few hours into it, I start thinking, okay, what exactly would I do if I stopped right now? Because I started thinking, this caffeine is making me feel, kind of jittery or heady. I keep twitching my foot. It's like, okay, well, I can just keep twitching my foot. I have the cat here. I can pet the cat while I hold the book. And if I need to take a break for a few minutes or go at my own pace, I can go at my own pace. It doesn't really matter. What exactly would I be doing if I stopped? And so, I didn't have any alternative that I didn't find to be depressing. I think this is the big trap, right? If you end up doing things that you find depressing, then, or in response to not having pushed through that initial difficulty you get doing something that's actually fulfilling because of these flashbacks, then you're going to feel worse overall. You have to push through that initial part and then continue to do so in order to reap the rewards of doing the thing that you do find fulfilling. Avoidance of the problem is kind of paradoxical, because it ends up leading to the problem being worse overall when it inevitably loops back around and hits you. It hits you harder than it otherwise would have, which is why confronting the thing and not letting it control your life principally here. Like, that's the really important part. Um, it should be central to my and anyone else dealing with the similar issues strategy.
You know, like I wish more NEETs made videos, but the problem is a lot of NEETs like aren't that creative or interesting. A lot of them are. They just are too scared to make stuff, and that's why I try to encourage people to make stuff. But like, you know, a lot of NEETs, you know, they just it isn't for them to make videos. And I want to see more people doing not doing the same videos that I do, but like doing stuff similar to what I do, of just being fucking weird people on the internet. I want more weird people on the internet. Can I just have that? Can I just have weird people being weird? Like that's all I want to see. I hate normal people. Like every day it feels like I hate normal people more. Like they say as you get older that stuff gets easier to deal with and you get better about it. Like I'm the opposite. I just hate normal people even more, you know? He had to become normal to live. That is true. I'd rather become homeless than become normal. Like, point blank. I would rather be homeless than be normal. Um, I, I, I just hate it. Like, it's hard for me to describe how much I hate normal people because, like, there's the, oh, normal fags re meme that everyone kind of understands, but, like, I actually hate them, you know? Unless you watch my channel, then you're cool.